Chelsea came out on top following an incredible first half at Stamford Bridge to make it 4 wins in a row, at the end of a gripping end-to-end action, which featured a record-breaking return by Cole Palmer and all 6 goals before the break. In the space of 10 minutes, Palmer had a hat-trick, slotting in from Nicholas Jackson's square pass before scoring a penalty, awarded for a foul on Sancho, and a stunning free kick. Brighton threatened to make things interesting by pulling a goal back, but then Palmer became the first player to score 4 times in the first half of a Premier League match to bring an incredible 45 minutes to a close. In this video, we're going to look at how Enzo Maresca managed to outsmart Fabian Hürzeler's Brighton and try to analyze the tactical approach that Enzo Maresca deployed in this game. Now let's dive into the tactical setups from both teams. Enzo Maresca stuck with his usual 4-2-3-1 formation, with the only change from our previous Premier League match being Malo Gusto replacing Tosin. On the other hand, Fabian Hürzeler's Brighton lined up in a 4-3-3 system. Let's break down how both managers approached the game and how Chelsea came out on top. Looking at game, Chelsea replicated a performance that they actually had when they played Tottenham. And this is when Tottenham decided to play with an aggressive highlight at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and Chelsea actually knew how to play through this. I think these are one of the principles that Mauricio Pochettino had left at Chelsea. Now Brighton had come to Chelsea to press them aggressively high and press them with an aggressively high line. Now this is where the problem started for Brighton, because Brighton can afford to play that high line when they are actually playing with slow center-backs. This is because Chelsea have very fast and deadly attackers such as Jackson, Palmer, Noni Madueke, and Jadon Sancho. Another thing that we saw in this game was Enzo Maresca's ability to actually adapt to the opponent. A lot of us, we've been doing analysis on Maresca, and there's a lot of speculations that have been thrown about of how Maresca is dogmatic. He's Pep Guardiola copy. He just wants to process the ball. He wants to control the game with the ball. No, we are seeing a new dimension of Enzo Maresca, where he's not just looking to dominate possession, but rather looking to even try and control the game without the ball. And this is actually making Chelsea difficult to break down and deadly in transition. Before we begin our analysis, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. A lot of you are watching this video without subscribing to this channel. Subscribe so that we can grow our audience. Chelsea were looking to press Brighton initially aggressively high, and Brighton were actually looking to create problems for Chelsea when they draw them to a high press. And Chelsea found out why, because even Maresca, in his post-match, talked about how they were unable to cope up with Brighton playing through them. So Chelsea were trying to press with the 4-1-3-2 structure, with Fernandes being the one to pick the pivot, while Palmer joining Jackson in pressing the goalkeeper and the 2 center-backs. Now, the way Brighton actually set themselves up was that they created a situation where they would actually push many players forward and try to catch Chelsea's backline off guard. You can see here that Brighton are trying to play from the back. The goalkeeper is standing on the ball and is actually looking to try and start the game. Chelsea are looking to press with Palmer and Jackson. Enzo is pushing to try and limit the ball from reaching the pivots, while the wingers are seating quite narrow. The reason why the wingers are seating quite narrow is that their task generally is to try and pick the fullbacks. So whenever the ball will be shafted across the fullbacks, the wingers will immediately switch and press the fullbacks, denying them any space and time on the ball. Looking at this structure, you can see now that Brighton have changed the idea. The center box are splitting so wide that Palmer and Jackson cannot cover them. And now even if Jackson is trying to press the goalkeeper has a lot of options because his team is actually stretching the pitch, making it difficult for Chelsea to press. Also, a point to note is that having players in these distances actually created problems for Brighton at times, because if Chelsea could intercept that pass, then automatically they would have a running goal. And we saw this time and time again because those paces were so wide. Now Fabian Hürzeler, as usual, instructed his fullbacks to play as wingbacks, pushing them aggressively high up the pitch. And this is because he wanted to create that numerical overload in the wide areas, as well as to take out Chelsea's attackers out of the game. So he decided to push his wingers so high and wide so that he could actually form a 2-1-4-3 structure, meaning that the wingbacks would actually join the attacking midfielders to create another line in behind, and this will force Chelsea's wingers to drop deep. Look at this scenario here. You can see the goalkeeper, the center backs, one pivot and another pivot dropping deep. You cannot even see Brighton's fullback in this situation. This is because those fullbacks have been pushed aggressively high to a point where Chelsea cannot press. Mitoma had that space to actually make runs behind Malo Gusto, and this really created problems for Chelsea in the initial phases of play. Now, because of this runs that were being made by the fallbacks, sometimes we started to see Chelsea creating pressing traps, with Caicedo being the one to shift across and actually intercept the ball. And through this instance, Chelsea actually even found themselves in situations where they were able to win the ball and immediately transition. You can see here that Chelsea have won the ball, and Caicedo playing the ball onto Noni Madueke. Palmer is making that run in the half space. Jackson is looking to make that darting run on the other side. Now Brighton are actually being caught unaware. Now in this phase of play, Noni Madueke played a poor ball to Cole Palmer, and the defender managed to intercept. Otherwise, if Palmer had received this pass, he will just slip the ball onto Jackson, and Jackson would have had an easy finish in front of goal. Now, because you can see Chelsea being able to actually intercept these passes and create problems for Brighton, you automatically realize that though Brighton were looking to play through Chelsea, the Chelsea were able to set pressing traps because of the structure of play. Now, one area that Brighton had a lot of strength in was playing those balls over the top, especially towards their midfielders. Chelsea were not pressing with an aggressive high line as Brighton, and because they were not doing that, and Chelsea were looking to sit in the mid-block, so the backline had to drop deep to try and cover the pace of Mitoma, and Brighton attempted to play those balls over the top. But credit must go to Levi Colwill, because he knew how to step out and win those duels against Danny Welbeck, because Welbeck was actually creating problems because he would win the first ball and then have his team win the second ball and actually transition. You can see here, look at Chelsea's 4-4-2 defensive shape. Look at the gap between the defense line and the midfield line. And Brighton are actually positioning their dangerous players in between the midfield and the defense line, ready to receive the ball and actually run at Chelsea's back line. Brighton are able to play that ball, and now the midfielder is able to receive the ball, pass the ball to Mitoma. Mitoma drags Gusto out of position, and now Brighton are actually running at Chelsea defense. Chelsea attack and midfield line have been taken out. Again, look at this position now. Chelsea decide to play again like this. They are pressing. Jackson, Palmer, and Madueke are looking to press. But you can see Brighton understand that if they manage to play a simple ball in midfield, they will be able to break those lines. And one thing that we saw with Brighton is that even though they attempted to play those passes in between the lines, sometimes Chelsea will intercept them and actually win that ball and immediately look to transition. You can see here, Brighton again are having the ball. Look at the distance between Chelsea's defense and midfield line. Sancho, who was tracking the fullback, has actually dropped in that backlight. And now Cucurella, who was tracking the winger, is now forced to leave the defense line to try and cover the winger. Look at the space that has actually opened between Levi Colwill and Sancho, and now Cucurella must stop that ball from being played in behind, or from a player looking to make that run. And this is how Brighton was creating problems for Chelsea. But because Cucurella was able to stand his ground and actually look to deny this player to pass the ball, Brighton decided to go back, but you could see the intention there was to actually exploit that space. In some instances, Brighton will actually look to play the ball in field, and because Chelsea's backline will now have compressed the quick switches of play we started to see. And that's why throughout the first half, we started to see Mitoma receiving the ball in very dangerous situations. And once Mitoma will receive this ball in these dangerous situations, he will not have the time and space to move in field, while Estupiñán will also look to try and make that overlapping run. And this was because of Chelsea's structure. Chelsea midfield line and the defense line was not quite compact. If they were supposed to play with the mid-block, then the defense line should have also looked to push high up, but they didn't. But you can see the overall situation of the game is that Brighton were trying to pick these players in between the line. Sometimes, these overloads were creating problems for Chelsea that actually made Chelsea to drop both Noni Madueke and Sancho in their defense line. The problem is that when Brighton center-backs were looking to attempt these ambitious passes, Chelsea's defenders would win this ball. And because Brighton had committed a lot of players in the attacking areas of the pitch, Chelsea could receive this ball and immediately look to play quick 1-2s and actually transition from defense to attack. Another thing we saw from Brighton was that they tried to play with an aggressively high line when Chelsea had possession. They tried to suffocate Chelsea in a 4-1-4-1 structure, pressing them aggressively and also having the defense line play aggressively high. Now you can see here, Sanchez is attempting to play the ball. Welbeck is already ready to spring out to him. The wingers are ready to spring out to the center-backs, while the midfielders are looking to cover any midfield passing option that Chelsea have. Now the problem with this man-marking approach system is that if one player is beaten, then Chelsea will have space to actually progress with the ball. But we even saw Chelsea consider goal through these kinds of instances, because Brighton's press was quite aggressive, and they committed a lot of players in that press. Now because Brighton are looking to try and commit a lot of players into that press, they will create some pressing traps in midfield by either allowing Caicedo to receive the ball. But Caicedo was giving Sanchez some good angles where Sanchez could actually play the ball to him. But Sanchez made a clumsy pass that actually saw Brighton score a goal. Now Palmer, in his press conference, said that Maresca had noted that Brighton looked to play with an aggressively highlight, and because of that issue, he realized that he could look to play his players such as Noni Madueke and Jackson in behind. And we actually saw a goal disallowed for Noni Madueke for making that run, and Jackson having some opportunities to play those balls in behind. So whenever Palma or Fernandez will receive their ball, their first instinct was to have those players making runs and immediately look to play those balls in behind. And this created problems for Brighton because Brighton actually conceded 3 chances in this kind of approach. And even in the second half, Chelsea were unable to capitalize on this. Now, another thing we need to understand is that when Chelsea had the ball, they moved into the kite with Gusto joining Palmer and Fernandez in these half-space regions, while Sancho and Madueke would hold the width. Now, in this kind of structure, you do understand that Palmer had the freedom because he was playing the number 10 and he could move all over the pitch. Now, Chelsea have managed to have their first home win in the Premier League, and it has come quite late. And Chelsea are currently sitting 4th on the table, and Chelsea will be looking forward to at least maintain their position and maintain their momentum. And this will actually give Chelsea an opportunity to go and reflect and try and tighten up other areas, especially in defense. Chelsea and Enzo Maresca have shown they have another dimension in the game. I believe that Enzo Maresca is moving into Mikel Arteta direction, and even more so moving towards a more pragmatic approach, meaning that he's taking the game-by-game approach, rather than trying to just instill a static way of play. He understands that for him to succeed in the long term, he also needs to win the short term. So when he says that players are not quite ready in that position, heavy kind of football, he sets the team out to actually get a victory, something that Thomas Tuchel did effectively for Chelsea. So what do you think about Chelsea's performance against Brighton? What do you think Chelsea are going to do in their remaining games? And what are your predictions for the next games? If you've enjoyed this video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you again.